Hello, so today I'll be making a book review of Leo Tolstoy's Childhood, Boyhood and Youth. So this was the first publication of Leo Tolstoy, written in 1857 when he was only 29 years old. This book is an autobiography of Tolstoy's early childhood years, and the book it consists of many small incidents and scenes from his life. It's divided in three parts. First is childhood, boyhood, and then youth, and each part consists of around 30 chapters, so they're quite small and focus on a specific scene or a specific incident or a specific insight. So since this book describes Tolstoy's life, it is a portrait of him as a young man, who he was. And so the question is, what was the character of young Tolstoy? And I think one of the most prominent things about his character was that he was a very self-conscious young man and person, always aware of his surroundings, of people around him, what they were thinking about him, social relationships. He was very much self-aware of these things, and also quite I would say insecure and shy. And there's this one scene, he goes to his first ball, and he's blushing, and he ends up alone and in the room, and he says, "I remained silent on that spot almost the whole evening." So this shows his sort of very shy and very self-conscious man. And another thing that is related to his self-consciousness, which is quite tragic, is that, and this is quite a prominent theme in his book, he takes it up many times, that he saw himself as an ugly person, which I think he's being a bit harsh on himself. If you look at pictures of Tolstoy as a young man, I don't think he was ugly, but nonetheless, that's how he perceived himself. Yeah, so he basically says every time he looks in the mirror, he feels a vague feeling of depression, almost repulsion. And I think this sort of, this is related to his self-awareness, because he is aware of how other people perceive him, and he thinks this is something negative. That's why I think he was quite shy and uncomfortable in social settings in the beginning of his life. So Tolstoy is very self-aware of his shortcomings, or at least his imagined shortcomings, his failures, you could say. He describes this one scene, his first time out hunting, and they're hunting hares, rabbits, and he has a dog by the leash, and he's a bit unaware, he's looking at something else, and suddenly the dog jerks because the dog sees the rabbit and he runs after it, and Tolstoy falls over, and everyone sees this, and he feels this as an immense, he feels such embarrassment over this. And this is, I think, emblematic of Tolstoy's character. Very, very self-aware of his his failures or shortcomings. But I actually think this is a double-edged sword, this self-awareness and self-consciousness, because it also makes him very aware of the small details going around in the world around him. And this is really one of the masteries I think of Tolstoy's literature, that he is so good at describing these small details in interactions between people, which sort of displays their psychology. For example, like how a hand fiddling at a woman's hand fiddling at a dress, the small detail shows her nervousness, or an eyebrow twitching, which shows the anger of a person. I think he's very good at describing and noticing these small details, which which reveal the psychology of a person. This is one of his big talents, I would say, in Anna Karenina and War and Peace. And I think this is connected with his self-consciousness, because if you have a very confident person who feels him or herself to be attracted and accepted by everyone. There's no need to be hyper aware of what's going around in the room. In a social setting, in a social room, you can just walk in there and be accepted. You don't have to reflect so much about it. But when you're like Tolstoy, aware of it, you can. That's when you notice these small details. For example, he writes, "Never was there such a familiar likeness as between Mama and my sister, not so much in the face or in the stature, as in the hands, the walk, the voice, the favorite expression, and above all, the way of playing the piano and the whole demeanor at the instrument." So here we see he has great attention to small details. One theme or aspect of this book, which I thought was really interesting, was this idea of imitation, or mimesis, it's called in Latin, and basically this fact, as especially when we're young, we look up to certain people and we try to imitate them and imitate their demeanors or ways of doing things. And for Leo Tolstoy, this who he looked up to and tried to imitate was his older brother Volodya, and yeah, in many different ways, such as mannerisms. But one specific example is Leo Tolstoy. He buys a painting because he saw that his brother has these paintings on his room, and so he wants to sort of imitate or be like his brother. And what's super interesting is that Volodya himself is imitating someone. He imitates their common friend called Dmitri, but also the demeanor of their father. He says, Tolstoy recalls in this one scene, "Let us play another round. They're playing cards," said Volodya, hunching one shoulder after the manner of Papa and reshuffling the cards. So here we see that Volodya is imitating the father. I think it's very interesting because it creates this chain of imitation. One person looks up to another and imitates them, but that person in their turn looks up to someone else and imitates. And I think this is very much the nature of us humans. We are very we look up to someone and we want to be like them. I think who we were, especially as young people, we can't say, oh, I was this specific person. Who I was who I wanted to be. So I wanted to be, like, if you're young, you want to be a football player, or you want to be an artist. You're not so much something set and decided. You are more so this will or dream to be something else, this imitation of something else. I think that was very interesting. So this book by Tolstoy, it's very much about growing up and being this transition from childhood to adulthood. And this, Tolstoy becomes first aware of this when he experiences that his brother grows up. So Tolstoy writes, "Henceforth Volodya drove his own turnout, inviting his own friends, smoked and went to balls. On one occasion I even saw him sharing a couple of bottles of champagne with some guests in his room." So now Volodya becomes a grown-up. I think it's a great scene, this because Volodya at this time is around 16, and I think there was this great humor in these young men, but they're acting like these grown-ups drinking champagne. And it reminded me of these scenes in Tolstoy's later works at the big parties and balls, which these adults attend to. But these 6 young men are like, it was sort of like a small microcosm of what is later to come. These young men pretending and imitating to be like adults, drinking champagne and smoking. This fact that Volodya becomes a grown-up, does these things which grown-ups do, creates a rift and a gulf between Leo Tolstoy and his brother Volodya, an alienation. Tolstoy writes, All that winter, until the opening of spring, Volodya had been inseparable from Dukobov. The chief amusements were continual drinking of champagne, sledge driving past windows of a lady with whom both of them appeared to be in love, and dancing with her, not at children's parties either, but at real balls. It was this last fact which, despite our love for one another, placed a vast gulf between Volodya and myself. We felt that the distance between a boy still taking lessons under tutor and a man who danced at a real grown-up balls was too great to allow of their exchanging mutual ideas. So here we see Tolstoy for the first time becoming aware of this, the difference between the childhood world and the adult world. And it starts this desire within him to grow up, to himself be like Volodya, to imitate him, who's to be like an adult. And this happens, this sort of initiation into adult world happens when he takes an examination. And so this is great scene. So he takes this examination and he writes, "Just as I burst into Volodya's room, I heard behind me the voices of Dubokov and Nechudov, who had come to congratulate me, as well as to propose a dinner somewhere and drinking of much champagne in my honor of matriculation." So he's examined, he enters the adult world, and of course the first thing he does is drinking champagne. It's sort of this symbol of becoming an adult. So after the congratulation and drinking champagne, they go out to this restaurant, and where they have this private room, and it also writes, where a bottle of iced champagne was, upon which I tried to look with as much indifference as I could. And I thought this was just a great description of him trying to control himself and not to show too much excitement, that he's very happy to be in this new social milieu and becoming grown up. What was interesting about this, I think, and which really shows Tolstoy awareness of other people around him, what they are thinking and feeling, is that he sees that, and he writes, "The truth was that Volodya, though pleased at my matriculation, did not altogether like my becoming as grown up as himself." So I think most of us in the situation would just be so happy of being part of this group that we wouldn't really notice what other people are thinking. But Tolstoy, with his hyper awareness, is able to see these small signs in his brother's features and expression, and how he says things, that he is not pleased or finds it annoying that his younger brother is now together with him and his friends. And I think it shows typical brother rivalry. So one of the great scenes of him becoming a part of this adult world and hanging out with his brother's friends was the scenes of friendship and fraternity, especially connected to with drinking. One scene, he writes, "My head ached and swam so badly that I thought each moment would be my last. Also that, for some reason or another, we all of us sat down on the floor and imitated the movement of rowers in a boat as we sang the chorus down our mother stream of Volga." So all of them sit on the floor and they pretend to be rowing and singing, and they're all drunk. And I thought it was just a great scene of friendship, fraternity, and also, the first discovery of alcohol. It's quite a fun experience. So another sort of rite of initiation into the adult world, besides drinking champagne and going out to restaurants, is smoking. And he describes his first time smoking, and the fact that he can't stop looking at himself in the mirror with the cigarette in his mouth, which was quite fun. And also another important theme is mirrors in his in this work. He is always looking at himself in the mirror. So before going out to the restaurant, he writes, "I was left with 2 whole hours still at my disposal. For a time I walked through the rooms of the house and looked at myself in all the mirrors, firstly with the tunic button, and then with it unbuttoned, and lastly without only the top button fastened. Each time it looks splendid. So here again, this looking at himself in the mirror. How does he look? How will others perceive him? So another side of Tolstoy's character, which is described in this book, is that besides this desire to become part of the adult world, high society, the mannerisms, and sort of the superficial things, he is also a very philosophical person, and also quite moral. He has this desire to be good and moral. And he says that his youth begins with this awareness that moral goodness and beauty are connected. And he says this insight is life-changing. It is the beginning of his youth, of his him becoming conscious of himself as an independent person. Later in life, Tolstoy would have a religious conversion. He would become quite religious and moral, and sort of the opposite of this high society aristocratic environment. He dressed like a peasant and he worked in the fields, sort of this complete opposite. I think this shows one of Tolstoy's main inner conflicts. This one side of being part of high Russian aristocratic society, of balls, parties, intrigues, etc., but also this more personal side of him that is concerned with morality, religion, and living authentically. And this sort of ends up in his religious conversion later on, where he rejects everything concerning high society and wealth, and he lives sort of in self-chosen poverty. So, in conclusion to this book, I think it is a very interesting read if you want to get an insight to Russian aristocratic society during the middle of the 19th century. That is sort of the societal aspect, but then there's also this personal. You get a portrait of Tolstoy as a man and his personality, which comes up in his two big works, Anna Karenina and War and Peace, and the characters Levin and Bazarov. They're very much a self-portrait of Tolstoy himself, and they're very similar to the young man that is described here. So I think this is sort of where these two characters come from Tolstoy himself. So that's why I think this was an interesting book to read.